my goodness. Why is it so good? That's awesome. What's up today, guys? Welcome back. I'm continuing the 83 LS swap Firebird project today, but doing something a little different, switching to away from the LS swap and the mechanical work and switching to a little more body type work, I guess. I've always wanted to put a spoiler on this thing, so I guess today's the day. I do have Firebird spoilers, and I do have the 83 style Firebird spoiler, but I want to do something a little bit different on this one. So I called up my buddy, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and I said, hey man, do you got any of those high-rise spoilers off of the Ford Focus? And he said, yep. So I went and got one. You might not believe this, or you might think that's an atrocity of some sort, but I always liked the way that they look. Not the regular Focus, but the SAP kit, I think they called it. The Sport kit, or the Sports Aero package. I think that's what SAP stands for, I'm not sure. But it's got a higher Evo type spoiler. And I think they look pretty cool. So the first thing I did was I measured some studs on the spoiler. It has studs that go down through and nuts that go on the bottom. So I'm probably going to keep it just like that. So I measured the studs, and I didn't just measure how far apart they were. I measured how far apart they were at the front, how far apart they were at the back, how far apart they are from each other, front to back. And then I made some center marks, measured out the deck lid. Then I measured how far out they need to be. So depending on what spoiler you're going with, that's all going to be different. This SAP Focus spoiler is from a 2005, I think, 2006 Focus, with the SAP Sports Aero package, or whatever they call it. So I measured like 3 times. They say measure twice, cut once. So I measured like 3 times. I drilled one hole. I laid out some masking tape and put the marks on the masking tape instead of putting marks on the deck or scratching up the deck. And then I set the spoiler on there just to see how I like it. So I think I got it where I want it now. And I'll show you what it looks like upside down, of course, and backwards. So it looks like this. And it's kind of cool. I don't know. For something that you can find in the junkyard, it's kind of cool. So I've got some holes drilled, not all the way through. There's actually 2 layers. There's an outer skin and an inner skin. So first thing I did was I drilled this front one, and then I checked over on the other side to make sure it was where I wanted it to be. And you can see where your studs are landing, if they're landing on your marks or not. And there's actually, when I took it off, one stud was just spinning around in circles, and the nut was seized onto the stud, and the stud popped out. So I'm gonna have to epoxy the stud back in there again. So there's actually 3 holes in the Focus, but I can probably shave that off. It's only a plastic nub, or you could drill another hole. But the more holes you drill, the more chances you have of leaks and stuff. So I'll have to silicone around the holes. I'm probably just going to drill 2 holes and shave this one off. And it looks like, so far, we're doing good so far. The holes are lining up, and everything's centered where I want it to be, and I've got it hanging close to the edge where I want it. And underneath, if you open the trunk, make sure that they're going to come out in where you want them. So you want to check underneath and make sure that there's nothing, you're not going to drill into anything special, or you're not going to hit something you don't want to hit, or whatever. There was like 3 or 4 different types of spoilers available for this body style, from 82 to 92, and some of them are pretty cool, but they're hard to find and they're expensive, and this one seems like it's easier to find, and not very many people really care about Ford Focus parts as much as they do about classic Firebird parts. So I'm just using a small bit to make a pilot hole, and this one here, it'll walk around a bit, so I'll use this one to enlarge the holes to the proper size. And if I need any wiggle room, I can always go a little bit bigger for wiggle room. I'm going to stick this block in here because I know that I'm close to my seal here, my weather seal in the trunk, and I don't want to drill into it. You can let me make the mistakes, and then don't do what I do. Alright, time to make these pilot holes a little bit bigger, just one size I guess. Depending on if your plies are close together or not, you might have to drill a bigger hole on the inside so you can get the nut on. And you might have to do that with a hole saw. But it's looking really good. I like that. So I guess I'll shave these plastic centering nubs. I guess I'll shave those off. I won't be using them. Well, I took those nubs off. There was like a pin sticking out, but it was hollow. So instead of shaving it off, I thought I would scratch it all up. I decided to drill the pin out because it was hollow and plastic. So I drilled it with the tapered drill bit, and it just popped out like a rivet. So it's nice and smooth there. That rivet stud pin thing is gone now, both sides. I guess there's a little bit of water in there. There's water leaking out of this side here. Probably because I drilled a hole in it. I did notice there's a separate section here, the seam. So there's actually a spoiler, and then there's this zigzag section that makes it wider and taller. But there's a little bit of water got in there, I guess. Man, let me tell you, the black flies are out, the mosquitoes are out. Try to shake some of the water out of there. I'm definitely gonna have to seal these holes up good with some silicone or something. Oh yeah, she's dropped right in now. There we go. That's better. Drop right in nice and flush. It actually contours, like, there's not much contour to the deck lid, but it's almost a perfect match. What do you think? What do you think about that? Oh my goodness. I kind of like it. It's not as wide as the Firebird spoiler because it's off of a smaller car like a Focus. But those little extensions on the bottom kind of widen it out a little bit. They kind of help. And the side of the car kind of rolls up and in a little bit, so it sort of matches. And it doesn't really stick out too wide, like it's not too loud and obnoxious. So it's looking almost flush with the back of the trunk lid here, deck lid. Actually the deck lid is out of alignment and it's not closed all the way. I've just got it sort of floating on the seal right now. But I got it lined up like almost as far back as you can go without overhang. It could go ahead maybe an inch or half inch, 3/4 of an inch. Really depends on what you like. I think in order to break up the turbulent air that comes over your car, to break it up, the further back the better. So if you see like a drag car with a functional spoiler on the back, you'll see it hang way out because the turbulent air is behind the car. So the further back the better, and that breaks up the turbulent air. You can see how bad the black flies are if they're flying around the camera. So this is my back hole. They're very rear. This is the front one towards the front. And the weather seal rides just outside here, just barely. So I'm just barely missing the weather seal. But where the weather seal is, they're closer together, so the stud comes down through both plies. But you'll see there's two plies, so this is the inner skin. So when something like this happens, you have to drill a bigger hole on the inside, like with a hole saw or maybe a tapered bit, depends on how far apart your plies are. I'm gonna have to drill a bigger hole with a hole saw or stepper bit or something, and that'll allow me to get the nut on. Actually, there's a factory one right there. See that hole? There's the outer skin and the inner skin, and I think that's where the spoiler would go on the Firebird. So that hole would allow you to get your socket in there and your nut in there. One thing I noticed is these lift arms here for the lift gate, they were weak. They were just barely strong enough to hold the glass up before, but now that I've got a spoiler on there, they don't hold the glass up at all. So I replaced the ones on the front, on the hood. So I have to do the same back here. They need to be replaced. So what do you think? Is it an atrocity, blasphemy, or is it nice breath of fresh air? Something different. I used to have these wires here. I used to have them sort of tucked in behind the alternator and behind the coils and under the fuel rail, and it was kind of tucked nicely. But I was watching a video the other day and I seen this one guy, and he was putting his injectors on, like, instead of the injectors pointing out like they normally do and you just plug them in here on the outside, he had the injectors turned around and he was plugging them in on the inside. And I think that's a pretty cool idea, because injectors, they just turn, like there's an O-ring at top and an O-ring at the bottom, but they can turn on the O-rings. So I thought that was a good idea to have the injector plugs back here, because the injector plugs, they were kind of like where I had my wires tucked in under the fuel rail. The injector plugs were there and the coil plugs are sticking up there, so all these plugs are kind of sticking up and under the fuel rail. But after watching a guy was doing a TBSS swap, and I was watching him do a swap, and he turned the injectors around back here. So as long as your wires are long enough, or if you have the adapter plugs or whatever, that's a pretty cool idea, to turn the injectors around, have the plugs back here, so that way the plugs aren't in your way, because I think it looked a lot better before when the wires were tucked in under the fuel rail. I can probably do that again, but I needed like I said, I needed the wiggle room. So these side panels wrap all the way around, and they had to come out in order to get the headliner out. And I was doing some other things back here for the fuel. So a lot of the interior from the seats back, a lot of it is out right now. Oh my goodness. Yes. Did you have a good day today? Did you go for a walk on the boardwalk? I did it for Dale, and I did it for the gram. So now I gotta do it for the tubes. Oh my goodness. Why is it so good? That's awesome. So the engine is not cold. I just ran it a minute ago, and I ran it twice in the last 5 minutes. So she's almost up to temperature. She's warm now. I'm waiting for the thermostat to open. I might actually take the thermostat and delete it, get rid of it. Oh my goodness. There we go. Better. Okay, I switched these two around. So the computer's on the bottom and the fuse block is on top. And I'm using the truck bracket. So so the wires are not chafing on the computer or anything like that. They're inside of this truck case and they come out this side here. It gives me more room, a lot more wiggle room, so I can probably tuck those back in again now that I have more room now. And I have one bolt. There was already a hole up in the corner there, so put one bolt in using this long extension deal. Put one bolt in there for now. So I think I'm gonna do that, which means I gotta unbolt this and drill some holes in the computer bracket, bolt the computer bracket down. So that gives me lots of room for my fan relays, fuse block, more room for my wires. This will bolt down here, the other one will bolt down in the battery tray. I won't have to drill any holes, I don't think, except for in the plastic computer bracket.